From Singapore is Prakriti Sofat, the regional economist at Barclays. Prakriti, many thanks indeed for joining us this morning. I must ask you, first of all, President Aquino's very bullish, if they are bullish, growth forecast. How do you react to that?
And I think we are a bit more conservative. I mean, the president's going for about 5.2% in the first quarter. We think probably 3 to 3.5% is perhaps a little bit more likely, given that we have seen that investment in the economy hasn't really picked up as much as the government was anticipating.
And overall, what would you see going forward then? What's going to be the headwinds for Philippines more than any other country, perhaps in Southeast Asia?
Well, I think the Philippines, to be honest, is in a good spot right now because the political environment is definitely much more stable. As a whole, we are looking for economic growth to accelerate this year to about 4.2% from 3.7% last year. I guess for me, from a medium-term perspective, the key thing for the Philippines is to raise investment to GDP levels so that potential GDP can get a further boost ahead. And for this, clearly what is important is increased capex spending from the government and clearly an acceleration of the PPP program, which is a key fundamental driver for the Aquino administration.
But Prakriti, the central bank again, would you say that they are now on course again and rates will stay unchanged at 4% for the rest of this year? Are they doing the right thing, being proactive rather than reactive?
Well, I think the central bank was in some sense proactive. Economic growth headwinds are seeming to pick up and they cut policy rates by 50 basis points cumulatively. But I think from here on, with inflationary risks clearly slightly biased on the upside, I think the BSP will remain rates unchanged for the rest of the year at 4%. I think it's worth highlighting that from a central bank credibility perspective, the BSP is definitely ahead of its game relative to some of its counterparts and hence is in a better position to manage the growth and inflation trade-off.
You mentioned the word growth again. The next course figure out for the first quarter is May 31st. How important is this figure and what are your forecasts for first quarter GDP for the Philippines?
Well, we're looking for growth to be much softer, about 3 to 3.5% in Q1. I think the risk may be slightly biased to the upside because the export performance, especially in the months of Feb and March, is seeming to be quite robust. But overall, I think for the year as a whole, growth is going to accelerate in 2012 relative to last year because our base case is that there would be a gradual increase in government capex-related spending and also some pickup in the PPP program. And finally, I think it's worth highlighting that the main pillar of the Philippines economy, which is consumption, is going to remain underpinned because we are looking for remittances to rise by about 7 to 8% this year to nearly $21.5 billion, more than 12% of the economy itself.
So therefore inflation really is on track, growth is also on course, while the central bank's doing the right thing, rates to stay on hold. When you wake up this morning with the news from Europe, for example, and the US, again, should the Philippines economy and those involved in directing it be concerned? What's the bigger worry, Europe or the US?
Well, I think external uncertainties obviously would be important for Philippines. I think for the Philippines, the key thing would be the electronics value chain because nearly 70% of the country's exports are actually electronics related. And in this regard, I think the turnaround in the U.S. economy, as we can see with ISM new orders, as well as the book-to-bill ratio, seems to be showing a positive signal for the Philippines. But broadly speaking, I think it's fair to say that the uncertainty in Europe is definitely something which will continue to weigh on global sentiment. But fortunately for the Philippines, Europe is not necessarily the most important trading partner. You have increasing trade relationships with the US, of course, but also China and the region.
Thank you for joining us. Prakriti Sofat joining us from Barclays again.